number one player for the Rangers that must deliver in the World Series for them to win it all? So I think the good news about this is there's a lot of options, which you would imagine there probably would be for a team that's made it to the World Series. But I'm curious for y'all, for the YouTubers, the Twolos, fan text, who is your number one person?
All right. Thought a lot about this, Kevin.
Okay.
Since you teased it, before the break. That's when I started thinking about it.
Oh, dear.
I think it's big game Nate. Potential to pitch 3 times? Could he pitch 3 times?
Yeah, it would be like Montgomery. Right, Montgomery did that. He pitched game 1, 5, and 7.
Yeah. So since he's pitching game 1 because he has that potential to do it, the opportunity to do it, I think it has to be him. He has to deliver. And I know it could be Montgomery too, one of those 2 guys, but the one that has the potential to pitch 3. And I think maybe Montgomery might even be available, all hands on deck game 7 of the World Series.
It would be tough if he threw 100 pitches.
Yeah.
You're not like super sore, but you're pretty sore after throwing competitively 100 pitches. So throwing the next day is highly unlikely.
But I think you need solid outings. That's my biggest thing, Kevin, is I think we're very still certain that there is a part of the bullpen that you don't want to expose or show off at all.
Sure.
And so the weakness really is starting pitching, because you have 2 really good starters, a third one that you're like, oh, he's still a competitor, But then everything else, I feel like run production can happen. I feel like the Rangers can score, but we got to make sure that they stop runs from being scored.
I like what you're saying, because Eovaldi can control his own destiny. Okay, because I think you ask a great question, Kevin, and I think you can answer it in many different ways.
Yeah.
I'll go back to 1990, and maybe that's too long ago, but the MVP of that World Series was Billy Hatcher on the Reds. Eric Davis, Barry Larkin, Chris Sabo, all of these guys. Why was it Billy Hatcher? Opportunity presented itself every time he came up to bat. Guys were on base to knock in. So it's a great question, but if I say Corey Seager, but let's just say Leote's batting 9th, it might be Evan Carter in this series, but let's just say Leote's batting 9th and then we know Marcus Semien's batting 1st, and they rarely get on base. Then how can Corey Seager superly impact this series if he's coming up to bat with nobody on base a lot? So opportunity has to present itself to the player that you pick, whatever player you pick, whether it's Adolis Garcia, Corey Seager, Evan Carter. Opportunity has to be there for them to impact, because if you're coming up with nobody on base, a lot of times it's very tough to impact this series. So that being said, I am going to go with Corey Seager because he is your best player, but I need opportunity to present itself. Also, how much will the Diamondbacks pitch to him? Yordan Alvarez got opportunities. He took advantage of those. Luckily, the Rangers did a better job of scoring than the Houston Astros did around Yordan Alvarez. So as long as Corey Seager is seeing strikes and they are pitching to him and the opportunity presents itself where he has RBI opportunities, he has to take advantage of that. Because once again, I don't think Evan Carter will be batting 3rd in this series because they have 2 or 3 lefty relievers. Yeah. So I don't think they're going to put them back to back, which that would put pressure on Garver, maybe Grossman, more likely Garver, but they might move Josh Young up there. They might move Adolis to 3rd. I don't know, but you're always going to want to face who's ever behind Corey Seager rather than Seager. But I'm going to go with Corey Seager. That's my long answer to that. But opportunity might present itself to Josh Young, and he's the MVP of the World Series because he had the opportunities to make the impact.
It might not surprise you. There are a variety of names, but one has come up a lot more than the rest. From the 903, it's got to be Semien for me. From the 972, I think the answer is pretty obvious. It's Semien. From the 832, El Capitan, Marcus Semien. And by the way, I just wanted to throw this in there because I don't know what else the guy has to do. From the 214, I think Bochy needs to deliver. No more iffy decisions.
What?
If that is your take going into the World Series, I don't know what to tell you.
They have to be speaking in general terms and not following the season, and so they just don't know any better. because every button he's pressed, whether it was I'm moving Evan Carter to fifth, I'm moving Evan Carter to third, I'm putting in Garver in the Baltimore series over Grossman, and he hits a grand slam home run. I am going to put Montgomery in the game with a runner on third base after Max Scherzer. I'm going to go with Spores for multiple innings. I'm going to trust him. I guess like maybe they don't like Aroldis Chapman or they're worried about Leclerc, and then you have to ask the question, you can't go out and pick up right now a healthy Edwin Diaz from the New York Mets to add to your bullpen. So those are the guys he's dealing with. He has to manage this team, and he has done a tremendous job of manipulating this lineup without a three-hole hitter. What I mean by that is you do not have a guy that he just bats third no matter who's pitching.
I'm glad that you said that, because from the 817, the number one player that needs to deliver for the Rangers is batter number 3.
I agree with that.
And I know that is more of an abstract construct because it's not a specific person, but they're onto something there. And I don't mean this as a dig against Evan Carter whatsoever, but when we talked about the potential for him to go to number 3 in the lineup, is because they had very, very little production. And Evan Carter had a couple of games, specifically offensively, where you're like, good job. But he also struggled in other chunks of that series. So they need some consistency from that number 3 spot for sure.
I love
because you're going to have to make them pay.
Yes.
They are going to pitch around Seager at some point, which means that puts pressure on that guy.
You know, one of the things I always have loved about the game, Mike, is maybe you did have an error or something in the field, but then you make it up at the plate. You know, or maybe you just you're struggling on that side, and you're able to be just stellar in the field.
Semien's play in the 6th inning, I believe it was the 6th inning in Game 5. I know it ended up, we still lost the game, but bases loaded, Spores gives up a rocket up the middle. Spores tries to catch it, also defend himself, and Marcus Semien makes that play up the middle. Looked like a game-changing play.
Yeah, and those that is the benefit of being in the field, being one of those players. Like when you're a DH, you're relied upon for one thing, and that is delivering at the plate. But whenever you have all these other jobs, you can really make a difference in a lot of different ways. And defensive plays can be like well known in the history of the game. Like, you'd be that highlight that's just there for a defensive play that you made in a World Series game.
From the 469, I think it's Chapman. My answer is actually Jose Leclerc, because
he'll be getting the final 3.
Exactly. And I see the merits of Chapman for sure, because look, I go back to Game 5, and I know it doesn't matter anymore because you won that series. I do still think part of the reason you lost that series is because Chapman could not finish off the 8th. When everyone talked about the delay with the fight and everything like that, and Jose Leclerc got cold.
Now, he didn't really have the opportunity to. He faced 3 batters. Like, you're going to have a whip of one, right?
True.
Like, he gave up a little hit to Kyle Tucker, and they took him out. So I feel like in that you can put some blame that he didn't have a 1, 2, 3 inning, but then you'd have to also, wouldn't you have to blame Bruce Bochy for not letting him face a 4th hitter and get out of a runner on first and 2 outs on his own?
I wondered if they went into that situation as like, if he puts somebody on, we're going to take him out of the game. I don't know.
No, they were because after Tucker, they went to right-handed hitters, and they didn't want him facing righties. But I do feel like that's a little harsh to go, if you don't have a 1, 2, 3 inning, you screwed us over.
And that's fair. He still makes me nervous
100%.
when he goes out there.
Me too.
And that's why I'm going with Leclerc, because I think you could definitely see some really tough games, or some really tight games, and you still need someone to shut the door, especially since, Mike, you brought this up last week, is you shorten up your bullpen almost to 3 pitchers, and then later in the series, leftover starting pitchers, right?
Yeah.
And so I think Jose Leclerc might be the person that's got to deliver.
Can I address a few questions that are on Twitch right now that I'm trying to answer? But I think these are legitimate questions. Hey, about the playoff roster. Hey, could we take Hedges off the World Series roster and add another pitcher? The answer is no. The answer is no, because Garver's going to DH most of these games, if not all of them. We really hope Garver DHs all the games, because that means he's doing so well that you don't have to try to maneuver another player into the lineup. When that happens and you have to pinch run for Jonah Heim, which happened in Game 5, you don't have a backup catcher. You don't want to, in the 7th or 8th inning, go, all right, we have no designated hitter the rest of the World Series game. So that's why you have to keep Hedges on the roster, because if at any point you need to pinch run for Jonah Heim and you go into extra innings or it's in the 7th inning and he's a very important run, you have to have Hedges come in defensively to catch, because you can move your DH to catcher, but then you have a pitcher hitting the rest of the game in that spot. So I think that's important. I was really thinking about Josh Young. I for some reason, it's weird. I just think he's going to...
Did I read the Josh Young text? I can't remember if I did or not.
No.
Somebody brought it up.
I just think that there's going to have... I don't know where he's going to bat in the lineup, if it's still going to be 8th behind Nate Lowe, but for some reason...
Does he need to stay there? I don't like him there anymore. I want him somewhere else.
It's going to be interesting with them having lefty relievers.
Yeah.
It's such a different series because you have all righty starters. Evan Carter's not going to have to sit out any game to start because there's no Framber Valdez. What I mean by that is a left-handed starting pitcher on their team. But at the same time, you might have to pinch hit for Evan Carter in a big situation because you just don't want him facing a lefty reliever in the 7th inning in a tie game with a runner on second base. You're probably going to hit Robbie Grossman. Maybe people won't like that at all. That could be I could see us next week talking about, why would you take out Evan Carter?
Yeah.
But they have to look a little bit at the numbers and his lack of production against lefties in the minors and majors and go, look, we're going to go with Robbie Grossman here.
It comes up from the 972, their number one player that has to step up, or not step up, be on point in this series and deliver, Jonah Heim. Because they're quite simple. If you stop Arizona's run game, you're going to win the World Series. And I know there is a lot of concern about Arizona's ability to be aggressive on the base pass, especially compared to the Rangers.
Yeah. I will say for Jonah Heim, a lot of it, not all, but a lot of it is dictated on the pitchers giving him a chance. Sure. Does that make sense?
If it's a big lead and a breaking ball, you're already behind.
Right. I mean, you have to be, you have to be 135 or quicker to home plate. You want to be somewhere. I always feel like it's best to be 1-2 to 135. That means as soon as you break your hands or lift your foot, that clock starts. That ball needs to be in the catcher's mitt by 1.2 to 1.35 seconds. I think any faster than 1.2, and you're giving up movement and speed on your pitch. Anything slower than 1.35 and you put your catcher in a situation where it's going to be very tough to throw out a base stealer. Yeah, if it's Christian Walker trying to steal the base or Tommy Pham, I think you're going to have still a decent chance. Probably you can get away with 1.4. But with those Corbin Carrolls, maybe Ketel Marte, Alec Thomas, those guys, you need to be in that 1-3 range. And Jonah should take care of business. And that could be big too, because I hope as the series progresses, Arizona feels like they have to steal bases. And what that means by that is they're not getting the big hits. And they're like, we have to try to manufacture a guy in scoring position. So the more the Diamondbacks feel like they have to run, the better, because that means they're not getting the extra base hits to have runs. That's why the Rangers don't run much anymore. Last year, Woody ran a lot. He didn't believe that the offense could just score.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I have to try to get guys in scoring position because I don't believe we're going to string together 2 more hits this inning.
I do like this from the 214. Everybody's the answer, though, right? And I think that goes to what we said at the very beginning of the segment. Not only is it everybody, but what I do like about this team is, I tell you right now, Corey Seager will be the MVP of the World Series. You'd buy that, right?
For sure. I think he's the favorite.
If I tell you it's Adolis Garcia, if I tell you it's Marcus Semien, if I tell you it's Nathan Eovaldi, if I tell you it's Jordan Montgomery, if I tell you it's Evan Carter, I feel like there are a lot of people that you could see surge into that role.
If Leclerc is 4 for 4 on save opportunities, it could be Jose Leclerc.
Yes.
If it feels like this is a very close series, you have 3 saves that are 1-run saves, another, let's say, save that's a 3-run save, they might be like, dude, Jose Leclerc pitched in some huge situations, and he's the MVP of the World Series. There's a lot of people to pick from. It's always interesting in these small series. It's just what opportunity presents itself to your guys.